Hi, hello, welcome back to my YouTube channel. It has been forever. It has been forever. I will just level with you. 2026 has been a year where a lot has happened, but at the end of the day, really not that much has happened. It has been a very sluggish year in terms of, I don't know, like a lot of things. The Olympics really just threw me off. Not that I was competing, I was simply a viewer, but I feel like that put me into like a month long slump of just I don't know. Anyway, work was crazy. I moved, if you can't tell, completely different background. This isn't just a different spot in the same place. This is an entirely new place. But yeah, now that I've settled in a little bit, I do want to get back to making YouTube videos because I don't know, it's kind of fun to just yap at a camera for however long. Anyway, I'm just gonna kind of ease back into this whole YouTube, like, booktube channel thing by doing a little bit of a haul. I hadn't really bought a lot of books so far this year, one or two here and there, very sporadically, and then the last month or so, I went a little nuts. Um, it was the NYRB summer sale at the very end of June, and I did put in a pretty big purchase. I also did some local used bookstore store shopping with my dad. Great father daughter activity. I had no choice other than to buy several books. I'm not just going to go into a local business and then not support them. That would be incredibly rude of me. And then there is just another kind of extraneous book that I bought. I ordered it because I like the author. I've read their other stuff. The plot sounded intriguing and I was just like, all right, let's just do it. Let's just, whatever. So let's get into it. I'm hoping that I don't overheat. I know a lot of places in the world right now are being struck by a pretty brutal heat wave. Today is not as brutal as it has been, but I did have to turn off the air conditioning in order to like have any sort of hope of the sound quality being like halfway okay. And I can already feel the room starting to heat up a bit. So pray for me, I guess. Let's start with the NYRB summer sale. I feel like that is the bulk of the things that I purchased. I got mostly the NYRB classics, but I did get two that were not like the NYRB classics. I got one that was just like one of the NYRB, like more like current books, and then I got one from Archipelago Press, which is a press that they distribute, and that is what I started with. The Archipelago Press books are short. I mean, this one's short in length. I think it's like 150 pages or so, but it's also short. It is physically short. Like just comparing it here to another book, they're like shorter and a bit wider. So that's kind of funny. But this first book that I'm going to start with is Kibogo. This is a book by a Rwandan author. So this is part of my effort to read something from every country in the world. I think I have read something from a Rwandan author before, but that was like in high school, so I'm not going to count that. I'm trying to read every place in the world as an adult. So this is my first like adult Rwandan book, and this is Kibogo by Scholastique Mukasanga. It was translated by Mark Polizzati, and I'm not done with it, but I'm a decent way through. And this book, I think, kind of sets out to explore the push and pull between new beliefs and old traditions. So, obviously, Rwanda, a country in Africa, did experience colonization. Colonization brought in religion as well, it brought in Christianity. And so far, this has followed this one woman in this like town who has very stubbornly stuck to her pagan beliefs. She's not going to like be swayed by the crowd to convert religions. And then this young man who is very, very enthusiastic about Christianity, almost too enthusiastic. And the part that I'm on right now, they're kind of teaming up, which is weird. I don't know. It's interesting so far. I've been enjoying it. I will probably finish it quite soon. Um, but yeah, that is Kibogo by Scholastique Mukasanga. The other non-classic I got from NYRB is one that I've had my eye on for a while. This is Perfection by Vincenzo Latronico, and this was translated by Sophie Hughes, translated from the Italian. So this was actually shortlisted for the International Booker Prize last year. I think that's when this book first came on my radar, and it didn't win, but it seemed interesting to me. It's about like digital nomads, like hipsters. I think they're living the book is by an Italian author, but it I think it takes place mostly in Germany. These people move to Germany because they can, kind of like work remotely and just like do whatever. And it's I don't know, it's supposed to I think be poking fun at the kind of like cosmopolitan international hipster lifestyle where everyone feels like they're being really unique and different and they have to get away because they're just so different from the places that they go, but at the end of the day, like there's still kind of like a convergence of like hipster culture across most of the West, if that makes sense. So I think this is supposed to be poking fun at that. I could be wrong because again, I haven't really read any of these books except for the one that I started off with, and even then, I'm not done. So, yeah, that's that. And then the rest of the books that I got from the classics section, one or two of these I've had my eye on for a while, but the way that I shopped at the NYRB summer sale last year worked out really well for me, where I did buy a couple of books that I'd had my eye on for a while and I was kind of like vaguely aware of. But then I just kind of bought some like random books that like I impulsively was like, "Ooh, that what's that?" And that worked out really well. Um for example, this book, The Unpossessed by Tess Schlesinger, I know I've talked about it on this channel before. That's how I found this book last year, and I still think about this book quite frequently. And I have a friend who I told like about this book very extensively, and I haven't gotten him to read it yet, but I still reference it quite a bit. And so I don't know. I'm hoping to kind of recreate the magic of just kind of like serendipitously finding this and reading it and loving it. Will I do that? I don't know. It's kind of a high bar to clear, but we'll see. So I will kind of like mention as I go through these whether or not I knew about them or not. One that I again kind of vaguely had on my radar was The Singularity by Dino Buzzati, translated by Anne Milano Appel or Apple, whatever. This is an Italian sci-fi book from the 60s, and it supposedly tackles the questions of artificial intelligence and whether or not like humans can kind of like recreate the magic of human consciousness from things that are not that. It's just about a guy, a scientist. He is summoned to go work on this like top secret experiment, like way up in the mountains. And he winds up doing that and then is shocked and appalled by what he finds, etc., etc. Tale as old as time, or at least as old as horrifying scientific inventions. Um, this again vaguely on my radar, but I don't know too much about it. I feel like I've seen this one around a little bit, but I don't. I kind of want to go in blind for some of these. This might be kind of a boring video if you don't care what I bought. That's unfortunately what a lot of this video is going to be. It's just like, here are the vibes that I got. This is why I bought it. Whatever. The next one was a complete, just random pick. This is Angel by Elizabeth Taylor. Elizabeth Taylor, not the actress. When I first started seeing, because NYRB has a lot of books by Elizabeth Taylor, again, not the actress. And I remember going on the site and browsing and seeing a lot of books by them, and I was like, wow, I didn't know that Elizabeth Taylor was also an author. Like, what a multi talented woman. What can't she do? Apparently, it's a completely different person with the exact same name. But all of that aside, this is Angel, and this is supposed to be about a writer. I believe it's basically it's about this woman. She lives like a very kind of like I think menial, kind of like middle class, run of the mill sort of life. And she likes to use her imagination to kind of like weave stories out of the really kind of like mundane parts of her life and the lives of people around her. And I think it kind of like spirals out of control in some way or another. I really enjoy reading books about writers because I think it's kind of like it's interesting because it's like obviously a writer is writing a book about a writer, and even if it doesn't exactly mirror their experience, it's I don't know, it's interesting to kind of like get in the headspace of someone who has had some success doing what they're actually writing about. It maybe feels a little bit more like it's telling on them, even if it's not like an exact replica of the way that their life has gone. I don't know, it's just interesting to get those kind of like insights that you really can only get from people who have done what they're writing about. Which obviously every writer has. It's not going to be something where it's like, oh, this is something that they did that they claim to have done, but like really at the end of the day, like have they? I don't know. But the proof that they've done what they're writing about is in the book itself. So anyway, that was probably a little bit more rambling than it needed to be, but I was intrigued by this. I want to read it. Whatever. Um, it will be read at some point. I don't know. This feels like maybe a fall book. This feels like a rainy October afternoon book. Will I actually get to any of these books in any sort of a timely manner? I don't know. Stay tuned to find out. The next book was also pretty like random pick. I think I'd started to kind of slowly browse the website the week before the sale went live, and this is one that I saw that week. So not completely spur of the moment, but like I wasn't really aware of it before then, nor have I seen anyone talk about this book. I think NYRB has become kind of increasingly popular over the last couple years, especially in the kind of like lit fic and classics spaces on the book side of the internet. It seems to have been kind of like picking up speed, but I still have not seen anyone talk about this one, nor the last one, or I think most of the others I'm going to talk about. But this is Talk by Linda Rosenkrantz. This is a book that I think is mostly vibes. It's like a no plot, just vibe sort of thing. It's supposedly about a bunch of friends on a beach talking about life, talking about, I don't know, the things that they're doing, the things they're observing. And this was written in the 60s. I find the 60s and the 20s, actually, which we will see some more of that later. But the 60s and the 20s to me are really fascinating decades because I feel like, at least from my perspective, they seem to be kind of like the very beginning seeds of the world that we see today. I think that when you do read older books, you see a lot more modernness than you would expect, regardless of how old the book is, just because like as you will learn as you read classics, like people have always been the same forever and nothing has ever changed, even though a lot of things have. The 20s and the 60s to me, they kind of feel like the very like origins of like where we are now as a society. Like you can really see the world we live in today kind of starting to take shape. I think there's probably other decades like that. I think the 90s are probably also kind of like that, but it's not as impressive because it's like 50 bajillion people who were born in the 90s. Like, it's not that far away in our collective consciousness. Anyway, so this is, I don't know. I'm excited to read this one. This is one that I hope to get to sooner just because I think it seems like a good summer book, just because it's a bunch of friends on a beach. What other season are you supposed to read that sort of thing in? So I don't know. We'll see. The next one, I have a good feeling about this one. I have a good feeling about all of these because like otherwise I would not have purchased them. Trust when I say that there was a lot of books like left on the cutting floor. This one, I don't know. I have a similar feeling as The Unpossessed by Tess Schlesinger, and this is a book and taking place in the 20s, the other decade I talked about finding very interesting. But it takes place in Berlin at a hotel, and again, it just seems like it's kind of like commentary on the times. I think essentially it's one of those books where it's just like a bunch of kind of ridiculous characters are all shoved into a small space and forced to interact with each other. In this case, it being a hotel, chaos ensues, funny things happen, comments are made, you laugh, you cry, you have a great time. So that just kind of feels like what this is going to be about. And yeah, I don't know. This one I have an itch to read. I don't think it necessarily has like summer vibes or anything, but I do have kind of an itch to read it. Yeah, that's that. Okay. This was translated by Basil Cretan with revisions by Margot Betauer Dembo. I apologize to you, Margot. I don't think I pronounced your name particularly well. But yeah, that is The Grand Hotel by Vicky Baum. I don't even know if I said the name at the beginning. Good God. Okay, we're a mess. You can tell this is probably the first time I've done this in a while because because it is. The next one, this is the last one that I really didn't really know much about before adding to cart, reading the description, etc. And that is The Outcry by Henry James. I have read Henry James before. I've read The Turn of the Screw. I read that in the fall of 2025, so fall of last year. And that is all I've read of him. Henry James does appeal to me just because he's somewhat of a local from where I'm from. He lived a lot of his life in the UK, but before he went to the UK, he lived quite a bit here. And I don't know, I just like reading a local, you know, a local. But basically this was his last novel before he unfortunately kicked the bucket. It's supposed to be just kind of like, you know, a comedy of manners. So put a bunch of dysfunctional people in a space and watch them implode, sort of thing. And it's about a man who the back says is supposed to resemble JP Morgan, so like rich robber baron type, right? And they are going to England and they're buying up a bunch of art, and it is I think like a commentary on the times and the kind of like excesses of the Gilded Age, which would have been over by the time this was written, but I imagine like kind of like the ghosts of that time still lingered because a lot of people were still alive. I don't think this is one of his more popular works. In fact, I know it's definitely not. Like The Turn of the Screw, which I've read, is pretty popular by him. Daisy Miller, I believe, is another one of his like really popular books, which also I think partially takes place kind of around where I'm from too, which is cool. This I don't think that I've never heard of anyone reading this, to be honest with you. So hopefully it's good. Okay, the last one that I got from the NYRB summer sale is one that I actually have seen around. This is one that I wanted to buy last year, but they ran out of stock before I was able to put in my order, so I did not. And I have been like looking in used bookstores ever since because again, this is I think one of their more popular titles, and that is Notes of a Crocodile by, I'm gonna say Q Maojin. I'm not 100% sure how to pronounce this author's name, so again, do apologize. I'm gonna say Q Maojin, and translated by Bonnie Huey. Again, oh my god, I'm sorry. I usually try to like figure out how to say an author's name before I like say it in a video, but sometimes that information is really hard to come by, especially like with translators. Like if an author is still around and they have a page, like they might have a thing in their website that's like, this is like my name pronunciation, or like if they're big enough to have a Wikipedia page, you know, whatever. That doesn't exist for everyone though, so I do apologize to this author. But this is Notes of a Crocodile. This takes place in Taipei, Taiwan, and it is supposed to be kind of like one of the very earliest like sapphic lesbian works of literature from the area. I think this was written and takes place in the 80s, and it is, I think it's mostly about like art students or like artistic university students, and they're just kind of like getting in trouble and falling in love. I think this is kind of one of those ones where, based on what I've heard, it's best to just kind of go in blind, just be along for the ride, whatever, etc., etc. So that is Notes of a Crocodile. I'm sorry, I don't have more to say about it. Okay, on to the books that I got from the local used bookstore. The first one is Never Let Me Go by Kazu Ishiguro. This is one that I feel like I'm kind of late to the party on. I feel like pretty much everybody's already read this. I'm pretty sure it came out in like 2005. Kazuo Ishiguro has since then won the Nobel Prize in Literature. I have read another book by Kazuo Ishiguro, and that was The Remains of the Day. And I read that when I was 15. I read it for a class, like an honors English class. And I will tell you, I was not ready for it. I understood what was going on, but I did not care. That was a book about an elderly butler, like an English butler, kind of reflecting on his life and considering the little time he has left. And I will say, as a 15-year-old girl, I couldn't even remotely get myself close to that headspace, and I didn't care. I was like, okay, we get it. You have regrets. Like, I don't know. I just like I was 15. So I think that that has kind of turned me away from more of his stuff, which I wonder why we didn't read any of his other stuff. Maybe I'll find out when I read this and it's like not appropriate for teaching a class of 15 and 16-year-olds. But this, from what I understand, like most of his other books are like sci-fi or speculative, like it's like soft sci-fi, like not like space opera stuff, but just kind of like there's a technology and it's changing the way humanity, whatever, blah blah blah. Basically, from what I've been able to read about this, like the back doesn't make it seem like that it's gonna be that. Maybe I'm just thinking of Clara and the Sun, which I think is about like a companion robot. So maybe I'm just thinking of that one, and this one really doesn't have any sort of speculative element. But this is what a lot of people say is like his magnum opus thus far. Based on what I can read, it is just a novel about kids at a boarding school, which like great, that sounds fantastic. I again probably would have been able to relate to a bunch of boarding school kids better, even as a student in a rural public high school, than I would be able to relate to an old man having regrets and just whatever. I don't know, but I don't know. I'm excited to read this. I'm excited to hop on the Kazuo Ishiguro train. I think there is an adaptation of Clara and the Sun coming out at some point in the near future. Someone sent me a trailer. Someone sent me a trailer. So yeah, I'm excited to pick this up at some point soon. Or maybe not, because God forbid I buy books and then read them quickly. That's just not how this goes. Okay, next, from my little used bookstore haul, I have A Fairly Honorable Defeat by Iris Murdoch. I don't know a ton about this. Iris Murdoch is one of those authors that I just kind of want to read most of what she's written. I haven't read, I think, a book by her since September, so it's been a little while. It's maybe we're overdue. But when I think so far of her stuff, I think I've read three so far. The first one was The Bell, and then I read Nuns and Soldiers, and then most recently I read The Unicorn, and then I have this one. I have A Severed Head, and then I have one more, something about roses on my shelf that I have yet to read. This one saw it at the used bookstore. If there's one thing about me, I'll always be getting an Iris Murdoch book at a used bookstore. Real. But basically, like most Iris Murdoch novels, and a lot of the ones that I have said, I love the type of novel where it's like you put a bunch of dysfunctional people in a situation, chaos ensues. I think a lot of those books are very cleverly written and well thought out because they have to be to even be worth publishing and reading. Like they have to be pretty well thought out. Um, and this one is about a guy, and I think he tries to like sabotage his friends' relationships to try to like prove a point or something. I trust her at this point. I trust her to just like, you know, that's a pretty basic concept, I guess, but I trust her. I trust her, man. um and so that's that. Next, I got The Call of Cthulhu and Other Weird Stories by H.P. Lovecraft. Listen, I know H.P. Lovecraft sucked as a person. However, he is long dead. My buying and purchasing of this book in no way monetarily supports him. And that is the difference between buying a book from a used book, no less, from a problematic dead author than a like really problematic alive author. I know that is a frequent subject of discourse on the internet, is which authors are problematic, why, whether or not they should be supported, and in what way should we support them, whatever. I'm not really going to toss my hat into the ring of that discussion, but I will say he's gone. And I don't think that reading this book will influence me to think any of the maybe not so nice things that he thought. I do think that this is really foundational in the genres of like science fiction and horror, and it intrigues me. I've heard that H.P. Lovecraft, again, as maybe nasty as he was a master at writing really imaginative and unsettling stories, and I do want to read it. So I have purchased this used copy, and I will be reading it when I get around to it, as with all of these books. Okay, last of the used bookstore purchases, I got The Ex-Wife by Ursula Parrott or Perot. I'm not really sure. This is another book written and set in the 20s. It is about an ex-wife. Um, Divorce was not very common until at least here in the US. Divorce was not very common until like the 70s. So to have gone through a divorce before then, things usually would have had to go very much awry. You're not leaving a marriage just because like you don't feel like it anymore, or the vibes have shifted and you no longer want to be a part of it. You know, I think is a valid reason to get divorced. Like if you don't want to be with someone, don't be with someone. I don't like whatever. It's your life, it's your relationships, do whatever you want to do. So I'm not exactly sure what happens to her, but it is about this woman who does get divorced, and she kind of has to reacquaint herself with life and society, kind of like with this new status. This book is one of the McNally edition books, which I think to me are just as good as the like NYRB books, and kind of like a similar vibe where they take books that are at least in the case of NYRB classics, they take books that are old and have merit and have stood the test of time, but maybe are not as popular either now or even when they were published as they should be. And I have really enjoyed all of the McNally edition books that I have read so far. I've read 3 so far. I've read A Green Equinox by Elizabeth Maver. I've read The Feast by Margaret Kennedy. And I've read Twice Lost Phyllis Phyllis Paul. And so I have a couple more McNally edition books kind of on deck. This is one of them now, and I am excited to read it at some point. Again, when, who knows? Really, who's to say? And the last book that I wanted to talk about was just like kind of a random extraneous book that I just ordered because I knew I'd want to read it. And that is The Last Contract of Isako by Fonda. This is a chunky one, but if anyone can get me to pick up a chunky book relatively quickly, it is Fonda. I have read all of her Greenbone saga, and I very much quite enjoyed those books. I have the last book in that series, Jade Legacy, right behind me. The other books from that series, I think, might be at my parents' house or something. I really enjoyed that entire series, and when I found out that she was coming out with a different book, I believe this was going to be a standalone, I was like, okay, I got to get my hands on that ASAP. I think it was a book of the month pick a couple months ago, and I was like, I'm gonna want this one in a nice floppy paperback just because I know all of her books are quite junky. And if for a chunky book, I want a nice floppy paperback. So the Greenbone Saga was fantasy. It was really more of like a soft fantasy. Greenbone Saga takes place in a world that very clearly resembles our own, and they just kind of have like a little bit of a magic system, kind of like softly put into it, where the stone jade gives some people the ability to like fight really well. And this one, I think it's more of kind of like a soft sci-fi sort of thing. I know that it's something to do with like I heard it was like a samurai inspired sci-fi. I don't know, because I think like as you can see the character here on the cover has a sword. I don't know if that's just because there's a lot of sword fighting or if that is actually the case. Again, I didn't actually hear much about this book before adding it to cart. I think I read like a little brief description and I was like, yep, okay, she's done it again. I got to do it. I got to see it. So, this one, I don't know. This one I might bring on vacation with me or something because I just feel like this would be a good vacation read. I don't really know. But anyway, that is all I have for today. I do have some more videos that I want to do that are a little bit more exciting than just like, here's some stuff that I bought that I haven't read yet and therefore can't tell you much about. So stay tuned for that. Hopefully, that will actually happen in a timely manner. But until then, goodbye.